Without further ado, then I think I'll pass it over to you, Izzy and Cecil.
Amazing, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Yomi and Crystal, for hosting us. We're really big fans of what you're doing at beBrave, so I've been really looking forward to this session, talking a bit about what we do. So I'm going to start with doing a brief introduction to Foundervine, who we are, what we do, and then Cecil and I are going to introduce ourselves. I'll share a bit more about my professional journey so far. Cecil will do the same, and then we are open to any questions that anyone has before we end the session. Sound good? Awesome. Nodding heads, I like it. In terms of who we are at Foundervine, we are a social enterprise who specialize in startup building programs. We help people start businesses for the first time, take their first steps into entrepreneurship, and scale their ventures, whether that is through customer acquisition or raising funding, hopefully both. And so we're really passionate about supporting the pipeline of diverse founders into entrepreneurship. And in terms of how we work, we partner with corporates, with local government, and with educational institutions to run high impact acceleration programs for diverse founders. I'm a really big fan of talking about how people make money. So if anyone has any questions about our revenue model or our business model, especially if you're a if you're a community organization that work in a similar space, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that I can about that. So in a nutshell, we were founded in 2017 by technologists, management consultants who were really frustrated with the lack of diversity we saw in the startup ecosystem. And we figured that there was a lot of talent in industry who could be leveraged to help build a diverse startup ecosystem. So we had lots of companies who had people and skills that could be helpful, and who had the money and the kind of corporate responsibility that could actually drive change within the wider ecosystem. So over the last 3 years, we have partnered with companies of all kinds to increase the number of opportunities available to young people who are, between 12 and 16 typically, and who are just thinking about what enterprise is, increasing opportunities for people who are interested in starting businesses, or typically 18 plus, to help them get started for the first time. And also supporting established entrepreneurs who are generating revenue and who have some traction to really take steps to get to the next level. And so we're driven by the mission to change the global face of entrepreneurship. And what we mean by that is creating an environment where it doesn't matter where you're from, what background you are, anything like that, you are not hindered from creating something that can make a change and impact our society. So that's what drives us. In terms of how we're structured, we're a team of soon to be 12, and we are all over the world. So we have team members in Merseyside, in Doncaster, in London, and I'm in Ghana. And I've been out here for a year now, looking into how we can expand our reach across sub-Saharan Africa. So truly sort of global in terms of our thinking and in terms of our impact. Advocacy and representation for diverse founders is a huge part of our work. So not only do we want to support individual founders in building the companies that can change our future, particularly in light of recent events where a lot of us are thinking about what the future of our economy looks like, we actually want to steer government and steer industry towards building the framework and the structures that allow diverse founders to thrive. So we've had quite a bit of interaction with government to date. We were invited by the Prime Minister's office to sort of speak about our work last April. And off the back of that, we said, this isn't enough. We want to invite 20 Black entrepreneurs, investors, and ecosystem people to Downing Street to have a real conversation about what government could be doing to lean into the conversation, and what industry could be doing to increase the opportunities available to diverse founders. So since then, we've done lots of different things, but all focused around the idea of engaging as many people as possible in supporting the mission and building that pipeline. So we've had over 4,000 hours of expert mentoring and coaching from people working within companies of all kinds, big and small. We formed 66 ventures on our programs. Some have gone on to achieve incredible things. Some have decided that, the experience was so valuable, they're going to take the skills that they've learned and use it to accelerate their careers within industry. And that's absolutely fine on our programs as well. We've had this is out of date, but we've had over 300 people now trained and skilled on our programs. The majority of our participants are consistently women, and we make a real point of that. And 0.3 million has been raised by our founders, and that's soon to grow as we're launching a series of investment readiness programs this year. And I've listed in the bottom kind of where we've been featured in the press, and we've been very intentional about letting the work speak for itself and showcasing as many of the founders in our community as possible. So people who wouldn't typically understand the challenges that diverse founders face, or who aren't in the ecosystem as well, can see the sheer amount of talent that we have within BAME communities, and the potential, if they are equipped with the skills and the tools to be able to grow. So that's Foundervine in a nutshell. And I'll introduce myself briefly before I hand over to Cecil. So in terms of who I am, I'm Izzy Obeng, Managing Director of Foundervine. I'll tell you a bit about my story shortly, but started Foundervine in October 2017. I am a trainer, a professional speaker, and I talk a lot about how we build a more inclusive startup ecosystem. As well as my role leading Foundervine, I'm also a non-executive director for Capital Enterprise, who do some incredible work supporting founders in London's tech ecosystem. And I coach startups, and it's great to see two of my coachees on the call as well. So really looking forward to this conversation and getting to know everyone a bit more. I'll hand over to Cecil.
Thank you very much, Izzy. So I'd like to introduce myself with just a couple of pictures, actually. So if I could present my screen. Let me just figure out how you do this on Hangouts. Present now. Okay. And then, okay, can you let me know if you can see this?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I just thought I would introduce myself with a series of pictures and make it kind of interesting for everyone on the call. So this is about me. This is a custom-built computer, and many of you possibly look at computers as kind of things that you use for work, but I look at them as machines and the individual parts that make them up. In 1995, my cousin was called to build a computer for my dad. He was doing computing studies in uni, and he challenged me to understand how to build a computer. I failed miserably, but from that experience, I realized that I liked building things. And in 2004, I started to understand how to take apart and put together mobile phones. So I started a business, and this was at the time eBay was coming kind of really big. And I used to buy broken phones on eBay and fix them up. And as you can see, I changed the colors and stuff and customized them a bit. I really wanted to earn money, but I learned how to fix phones, and I realized that all technology is just made up of parts, just like individual parts. But I didn't really continue this business because I wanted to focus on my studies. And I went to King's College University, and I studied biomedical science. It was really hard. It was long at points, very boring. And I really kind of learned how to become organized and disciplined at learning and passing exams, etc. And I also learned how to drink at university, as everyone does. But I graduated, and then I went to go and work at at London Clinic, which is a hospital on Harley Street. And at the clinic, I was in the lab doing lab work. It's quite boring actually, but I realized there that I liked tech a lot more than medicine and medical things. So I wanted to change, but I didn't know how to transition my career from medical to tech. So I did some research and applied for a company that makes apps for the NHS, and I managed to get in. I learned then that your career is actually quite flexible, and if you apply yourself and change your career in a way that you always account for something you've done in the past, it's easier. So I went to go and work at that company, and for a year it was really great, but then after a while I stopped getting as challenged as I wanted to be. And so then I applied for Accenture, which is a management consultancy, and luckily I got in and went to go and work at one of the largest companies in the world. There were about 69 people on my cohort. This is me in Chicago with some of my cohort. I think you can see I'm the only black person in the picture. And this was the case in Accenture. I was the only black person amongst so many other people that, just came from really different backgrounds. A lot of them from Oxford or Cambridge, really rich families, loads of experience in doing what I now had to learn how to do. The work at Accenture, there was loads of ambiguity, and it was really challenging. But I think it taught me a few things. So this is me actually in Chicago learning how to code Java. So they sent us on a course, 4 weeks, to learn Java and management consulting. And I didn't really think I would be good at coding. I had no clue about code, absolutely nothing. And actually, I became really good. And during this time out in Chicago learning how to code, I won 2 out of 4 prizes for the best development and also the fastest learner. And that was in such a short space of time. So what I learned here is that actually I have a skill at learning tech, but I didn't know that before. And I'm sure there's loads of other people out there that are good at tech, but just don't know it. And so when I came back to London and working for Accenture, I was working in this building here, so Barclays building, and I was up there in the sky building a solution for a problem that the bank had. It was to do with data and information on a project, and I was scrutinized on information that was coming through the solution every single day. There was loads of kind of learning points. I learned how to code a lot more, how to manage a team, how to coordinate a project, and how to be accurate in reporting and just managing processes in general. It was really great, an opportunity for me to learn a lot and really set me up in terms of understanding how businesses work. And I left Accenture to go on to bigger and better opportunities. And one of those opportunities was helping Izzy build Foundervine. So back in 2017, I got together with Izzy. She had this crazy idea to help entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds build startups. And I remember the mobile phone business I built that was earning some money, but not doing it in a structured way and not really succeeding as much as I wanted it to. And so I really thought this was a great idea. So I set on a mission with Izzy to help build Foundervine, to create loads of change. And we have David and Barbara and other people that we've done this with. So it's been a great pleasure so far. So yeah, I've got 11 plus years in business environments now. I'm a director of a company called Hiberus, which builds technology. It's based in Spain, and I've worked for a host of clients, many brand names that you'd probably recognize. On a day-to-day basis, I would sum up what I do into 4 things. So managing projects, got teams of people, building software or delivering projects that I just make sure things are running fine. I do business development, so that means getting new clients either for Hiberus or for Foundervine, speaking on the phone a lot and convincing people about things, and also strategizing, so making plans about how to do certain things, and also making sure those plans are then followed through. And loads of emails, LinkedIn messages, emails, WhatsApp, loads of communications. A lot of those, are situations I have to respond to, problems, etc. So yeah, that's my storyline and what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Amazing, thank you, Sess. So I will share a bit more about me. I unfortunately don't have much of a slide deck to show you, so I'll just talk. But in terms of my background, so I often talk about what it was like growing up where I did, which is in Tottenham, in North London, and how a lot of my upbringing kind of inspired my mindset and my approach to how I've kind of gone about my career to date. So I grew up in Tottenham. For those of you who know Tottenham or have lived in Tottenham, you'll know that it's a up and coming area. It's probably one of the most slowly gentrifying areas in the world. There's still a lot of sort of challenges that local residents face. And I kind of grew up in the sort of 90s and early thousands around a lot of young people who had a lot of potential, a lot of entrepreneurial energy, let's say, but who didn't necessarily have the sort of tools and the knowledge and the networks to be able to leverage those talents into something more useful than some of the paths that were eventually kind of gone down. And you know, I remember my dad being so worried about me that he pulled me out of school and sent me to boarding school in the sticks in sort of Surrey somewhere. I was so miserable there that he eventually had to take me out after a year, and I ended up going back to the state school that I was in. And it's kind of something that I think a lot of us who have kind of African or Caribbean parents have, in that, you know, your parents settle where they settle, sort of whether those are inner city areas or whatever, and want the best, and often maybe don't have the kind of the kind of networks or the support structures to be able to support you in the way that they want to. So I kind of grew up knowing that something had to be different, and that I didn't want to end up kind of how a lot of my friends ended up, or kind of in low paid and insecure work, like I saw some of my family in. And I thought that going into politics was going to be the answer to that. So I ended up doing sort of various internships and work experience in politics, working with my local MP. I spent some time in a think tank when I was 15 or 16, and other bits and pieces like that. And I went on to study politics at University of Bristol. And it was during my time there that I realized that there was so much more that could be achieved in terms of financial inclusion if we were able to support more businesses in our community, and to sort of increase the capacity of people to go into business and entrepreneurship as well. And at the time, you know, I was a student, I was doing waitressing or whatever. I didn't know what that looks like, but I knew that maybe politics wasn't the answer. So I ended up starting my career at a company called KPMG, and I was miserable for the first year of it. I wasn't in the right place for me, and it was such a culture shock to be in an environment in which there were very few people who looked like me. I think that has changed more recently, but at the time in my team, I remember joining in a cohort of about 400 people across the firm, and I was the only Black person. And I remember a white male colleague kind of pointing it out to me. He's like, "Oh, Izzy, you're the only Black person here." And I thought, I would have realized that before you, but thank you for pointing it out. And during my time there, I thought a lot about the challenges in terms of getting more people from our communities into these kinds of spaces and what we can be doing. I eventually landed on building talent development programs and culture change programs in people consulting at KPMG. So I spent a lot of time working with organizations who were looking for innovative ways to help people be better in their jobs. At the time, I was coaching professionals, supporting sort of mostly Black women getting into entrepreneurship or getting into consulting, whatever it was. And I couldn't help but think, what if we could provide the same level of rigor and expertise to startup education as we did to corporate education? At the time in London, every single startup event I went to was just the same panel, copy and pasted, the same middle class white male panel. And there were very kind of few spaces, as far as I could see, for people who aspired to start businesses, to start up. And so we always talk about sort of starting lean at Foundervine, and in terms of our journey, people see kind of what we do now and think, okay, like, what are the first steps you take into doing that? For me, it looked like telling my friends on Facebook that I wanted to run an event, and getting someone in my company to sign off on a space, and having 30 people, just 30 mostly Black people, come into a room and listen to 3 Black founders talk about how they built their startups. The event was called How I Built This, and it was the very first Foundervine event in 2017. So starting small, starting lean, and getting that feedback to scale the model. 3 months later, we hosted our first conference in a bigger room in KPMG. 150 amazing young people turned up. And then 2 months later, we hosted our first Startup 54. So we continued building on it and responding to feedback. And I may have never left my job if I didn't get the opportunity to do a TEDx talk in May 2017 on the future of entrepreneurship. And there I had the opportunity to kind of share a vision I saw for the future of entrepreneurship, both in the UK and Africa, that eventually led to a series of conversations that made me realize that I needed to just bite the bullet and go for it. And if, like me, you have parents who the idea of you leaving something like KPMG to start a what? You become an entrepreneur, was just a bit mad. Then, you know, the kind of society and the family members around you can often discourage you from taking those first steps, because it is scary, it's insecure. You know, they've got your best interests at heart, but often, you know, they don't know how it's going to go. So I'm a big fan of taking the plunge. And once you've got business experience, no one can take that away from you. It's often a revolving door. If you spend 2 years doing something and it doesn't work out, and you have enough of a safety net to be able to sort of survive those 2 years, go for it, because the learning that you'll get in those 2 years will be so valuable, and then you'll be able to go and work for Goldman Sachs or whatever afterwards, if that's what you want to do. But anyway, so that's kind of where Foundervine eventually came from. And over the last 3 years, we've grown into a team of 12. We've run programs across the UK, from London to Bristol. We've done sort of programs in Warwick, etc. And fundamentally, we are keen for as many young people who are a bit weary of mainstream startup programs, don't really feel like more mainstream programs cater to their needs, to feel like Foundervine can be their first steps, their first friend when they're starting up. And we are here, we run programs all the time. We do one-to-one sessions. I coach startups, really passionate about helping people grow. So that's where we are at the moment, and more than happy to take any questions from anyone about our journey or what we're up to, or absolutely anything else that you want to ask. But for now, I think I'll hand back over to Yomi, and then we can go into a Q&A.
Great, amazing. That was very, very interesting. Before I ask any questions, because I've got a bunch, Does anybody have any questions they want to ask, whether in the chat or if you want to unmute yourself, please do so. Ooh, we want to hear more about Africa.
Yeah, sure. So I feel like COVID-19 is like the biggest caveat that anyone can ever use for any sentence. So before everything kind of went a bit crazy, I decided to move to Ghana in sort of mid last year, and since then I've been sort of building relationships on the ground here in Accra, and just figuring out what Foundervine looks like out here. I've visited Ghana a lot, and so I knew it was important as someone in the diaspora to come out here realizing that you are not bringing anything new, you are not doing anything special. There is already a lot of incredible provision out here that is heavily underfunded and undersupported. And so humbling myself coming out here was one of the biggest things I wanted to do. And I knew that for the first 6 months or so of being here, I would just be listening. I would just be finding out what was already happening on the ground and how Foundervine can complement those efforts. Since I've sort of been here, I would say that probably about 85 to 90% of my time is spent managing the UK team remotely. And then the sort of remaining 10% is spent speaking in schools, doing workshops, going to universities, engaging with different hubs out here, and just figuring out what provision is like on the ground. We face sort of challenges across the continent in terms of, like I said, hubs being under-resourced and entrepreneurs finding that when they get to the stage where they've managed to overcome all of the hurdles, whether that's infrastructure issues, electricity, the lack of funding, all of those things, once they've managed to actually build something, the support they need in terms of scaling their model tends to be absent, because so much of the provision that's funded by multinational institutions or whatever focuses on idea stage, early stage, but there's less support for entrepreneurs who are muddling along and need some specialist support to scale. So sort of long story short with that, I'm still out here having those conversations, open to partnerships. Before COVID, we were planning our first Startup 54 event out here. We'd had a commitment to run a program in Lagos as well. And we were also talking to organizations in sort of Mozambique focused and South Africa. But then the world went a bit crazy. So I hope that answers your question, Kwamina.
I think he also said, how can we, the diaspora, support Ghanaian entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think access to networks and funding is the things that always come up over and over again. A brilliant example of the funding one is, I don't know if many of you come across Weka yet, you will soon if you haven't. Brilliant entrepreneur of Congolese origin, Benny, who has set up a platform that allows anyone to invest small amounts in African startups, and they're piloting in Ghana as we speak. And it's one way in which individuals can, give their money towards people on the continent. And there's a lot of conversations at the moment happening around, for example, our parents' generation, remittances back home were such a huge part of their world, but for the generation they've raised in the West who have a weaker connection to individual family members, they still want an opportunity to give back, but not necessarily to those family members. So looking into ways that we can support them to building the ecosystem more generally. And one of those ways is by supporting organizations that support entrepreneurs on the ground, so giving your time as a volunteer, whether that's remote or on the ground, and providing that network, or funding organizations that support people on the ground. Kwanda is another one that's doing some incredible work on the continent as well. Jermaine Craig, and what we give, we sort of, I think they're called villagers, but essentially you become a villager for Kwanda and you give a certain amount every month, and they invest that back into projects back on the continent. So lots of different ways. But one thing I would say is that I meet a lot of people back in London who want to do something, but there's always when I'm senior in X, or like when I'm this age, or, I'm going to go back home. But the time is now. The time is now for more of us to be on the ground, and there's only so much impact you can have remotely. I'm a huge advocate for just spending some time out here to really understand the challenges and seeing where you can contribute to the future of our economies. And the year of return in Ghana was eye-opening for us, and we had hundreds of Londoners out in Ghana over Christmas. What happens after Christmas? Where do you spend your time beyond partying to actually invest into the local economy? I think those are big questions that, as a diaspora, I think we need to be asking ourselves.
Definitely. One more question from Atto, and I guess the question is, there's a lot of wealthy people in Africa. What are your thoughts on the fact that, they don't really plug into these issues that you are mentioning?
It's a good question. I meet a lot of wealthy people in Ghana as well who are just doing their thing. The mindset is different, and the way wealth is built is different, and the routes towards trust and impact are different. And what I would say is that there's also a whole bunch of wealthy people in the UK who do sweet FA for the wider society, or support people. But because of the disparity in wealth on the continent, we hold wealthy people to account a lot more for what they don't do. And for me, I meet people here who are often kind of first generation wealth or second generation wealth, and who are in so many ways still hustling. Whereas, in the UK, there are much stronger institutions that allow for philanthropy, allow people to channel their resources into projects that can be helpful. So we have a long way to go. And I think it's unfair to ask an economy, a society, which is only 65 years old or something, to have the same infrastructure in terms of redistributing wealth that a country that is 500 or plus years old has. So we've got a long way to go, but we shouldn't be discouraged by the fact we're not seeing the scale of support from wealthy people on the continent, because we're so young as a society here.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Cecil, I've got a question for you. So in your story, you kind of talked about learning a lot, and learning things about yourself that you didn't know initially. So how important do you think kind of exploring different opportunities and experimenting is? And I think it's an important question for young people who are now thinking about, especially this uncertain time, right? So how important do you think, just doing a course that you just find a free e-learning course on coding and you just try it for the sake of trying it? How important do you think that is?
Yeah, so the world that we're living in right now, if you look 20, 25 years ago, 40 years ago, a lot of the professions and things that people are doing for livings did not exist, right? You've got things like software engineer. Like 40 years ago, that was not a profession, right? You've got things like asteroid mining. I don't know if you've heard of asteroid mining, where you get special raw materials from asteroids that are found in limited quantities on Earth, right? That's going to be a valid profession in the future, right? And these things are always changing. But I think a lot of us from African backgrounds are stuck with this notion that there are only a few professions that we can go into: accountancy, becoming a doctor, becoming an architect, etc. Right? And this is given to us by our parents, who wanted to make sure that we had stable jobs and that no one would discriminate against us, which is absolutely the right thing that they should have been pushing us to do. However, that's not as valid now as we see. And the advent of technology and the types of businesses that technology has created and the different business models has meant that there are so many different things that you could be doing in life to generate an income and also be happy from doing it. And I talked about myself selling mobile phones on eBay, and I saw that as a side hustle. I look back and I think, wow, like I could have actually turned that into something big, but I was of the mindset that this is not a way to live. The way to live is to go to university, study something, and then get a job at the end of it. But now what I do know is that if you are passionate about something and you put enough time and effort into it, you will always come up on top. It's just undeniable. You will always come out on top. You will be able to sustain yourself from that. But you should definitely take risks, but don't take silly risks, right? Don't say, oh, I love plants so much, so I'm just going to focus on this plant app, and I'm not going to get a job, right? Just make sure you have income coming in, but always look at what you could be doing on the side for freedom. But how do you know that these things are going to work, or you're even interested in those things? You have to try things, basically. And I talked about myself learning coding, and that was by chance that I learned it, because I went to work for this company that said, we're going to send you on a coding course. But what else could you do to learn new things, right? There's stuff like Udemy online or Khan Academy. There's very short courses you could learn. If you have a slight interest, explore it a bit, because it might turn into something that could sustain you for the rest of your life. And you may not even know that you're good at that thing until you try it. So do I think learning is important, or how do I think learning could shape your life? Like, it's so important, and you shouldn't just look at it as a university thing or a college thing. You should look at it as I must be continually exploring new things and learning things and understanding how I learn so I can do it quickly. Because once you know that, that is true freedom.
Amazing. I've got a question from Benita that says, do you think the digital, automated and robotic changing world will help build more opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So my company, we use robots to do things that people were previously doing, and those things were really boring jobs, right? So I'm not really ashamed of that. And when I say robots, there are physical robots in warehouses and factories and stuff, but there are software robots that work with old software and take information and process it into new software. This sounds ridiculous, because actually all software should be able to communicate with each other without having to use something like a robot. But some software is so old that, in fact, in some companies, no one knows how it's built. And I can tell you some of the biggest companies in the world have software that is running on a continual basis. All the people that built that software are no longer there. So they don't know how it works, therefore how to change it in order to change, how that company operates. And this I see is bringing a large kind of surge of demand for robotic process automation. Robotic process automation sounds complex, but actually when you look at it, it literally is as simple as downloading software from the internet. Take UiPath, for example, installing that software and then teaching it to recognize things on a screen, and teaching it what to do when it recognizes those things, what information to pass from one software to another. You don't really even need to learn how to code to do that. And I've worked for management consultancies where we trained graduates to do this stuff in like 2 days, and then we're charging them out at thousands of pounds a day, right? So there are so many opportunities in that space. And I think, companies like, is it Andela, are doing stuff like this, where they're teaching people how to use robots and also train robots that doesn't really require too much coding knowledge or previous knowledge, and it's providing income for their families. So will this help build more opportunities? Absolutely. And if it's something you're interested in, I would advise you to just take a dip into it.
Amazing. I guess a question that's good for a time like this: has there been a time when you guys have felt like quitting but didn't, in any aspect of your professional life, or just, yeah? And that's what I would do. or both?
Yeah, Izzy, do you want to go first? Or shall I?
Yeah, sure. At least 3 times a day. Um, starting up is tough. It's the toughest, stupidest thing you will do. I genuinely think that, I have so much respect for people who take on the journey. And like, all jokes aside, it's one of the most amazing, incredible things you'll ever do. And I don't think anyone will ever regret taking the steps to start something, because even if it fails, you've learn probably 600 times as much as you would doing one role within an organization. I love the process of starting up. I love the process of learning every day. Cecil and I have had conversations over the last 2 days that we would just never have dreamed of having 3 years ago, not even 6 months ago. And so it's fantastic to see, your baby grow. But it's extremely tough. And I know founders talk about mental wellness a lot, the kind of bipolar nature of starting out, that you have a moment where you're really high when something comes through, then you get an email through and you're just like, oh gosh, everything's awful. And that happens just so constantly. And I think that it's so important to keep yourself grounded. So when things are going amazingly, they're not really affecting you that much. When things are going really badly, you know that this too shall pass. So I try to keep myself as grounded as possible. Whether that is connecting through family members or limiting screen time, whatever that is. But yeah, it can be tough.
Yeah, from my side, I think wanting to quit is a natural thing. You want to, especially when you're really stressed, you want to return yourself to a position of not being stressed, and therefore quitting seems like a really good option. But I think just over my whole career and lifespan, I've realized that there are things that when you persevere at, you begin to reap a lot of benefit from them, and that when you quit, sometimes you've already invested time in them, and all of that goes to waste. That's not to say that you should just persevere at everything you do, even if it's failing. Just be delusional and say, I'm just going to continue because then I'll be successful at the end. But it's like doing stuff, noticing feedback, understanding the reasons for failure, and trying to build in some process or taking an action to remediate those reasons for failure. And when you can't do that, then saying, right, I think it's actually time to call it a day. With Foundervine, there were various times that I thought, actually, like, is Foundervine ever really going to be, earning any money? Like, we're here for the social good, and people know that we're doing good work, but actually, like, who is going to be paying us to do this stuff? Who's going to pay us to build startups from using people from various different backgrounds that are complete strangers to them? And not that I felt like quitting, I just felt like, oh, like, is it worth it? And as Izzy was saying, the conversations that we've had over the past few days proves the point of not quitting. It's the fact that when you persevere at something and you understand how to change your strategy, and we did change our strategy for Foundervine, that things become worth it in the end. And I think if anyone on this call wants to know if that is real, then Foundervine is a testament. But there are so many other stories of people doing this or have done this that could have quit but didn't, and then went on to have great success. And there's people like Steve Jobs, for example, who was fired from his company but then made a comeback and made Apple the richest company on earth. I know not everyone could be Steve Jobs, but it's just examples like that that show you that quitting is possibly not the worst option in most cases.
And that kind of leads on to my next question. So a lot of people, a lot of young people as well, feel like success is, becoming the next billionaire, or, starting the next tech startups that gets, a lot of investment, and then you grow to earn £1 billion, right? What are your thoughts on that? Just in general, on the idea of, success is me trying to make $1 billion or
Yeah.
Facebook or Amazon.
I'll say something really short about this. So in the UK, the backbone of Britain is not the big companies. It's actually like hundreds of thousands of small companies. And all of those small companies are employing people, generating value in people's lives, giving them products and services that they need. And those are really, great for the economy. And the people running those or founding those businesses, they're not super rich, but I can tell you a lot of them are super happy. And many of these big companies you see are run by people that are actually not super happy, but they've pushed and pushed and pushed and got to that stage where their companies are really big and they are doing this the size of trading that they are. But I think people should be mindful that you don't have to create the next unicorn in order to be successful in business. Actually, you could create a series of companies that employ 5, 6 people, 2 people, and still be very successful, live the type of life that you want to live. If anyone has read the book, The 4 Hour Work Week, which teaches you how to calculate what you actually need for a good life and also how to dreamline. So, how does your ideal day look like and how much does it cost? You'll be able to see very quickly that you don't need to be Zuckerberg or Bezos or Steve Jobs to have a good life. You could be, 1 millionth of that, 1 billionth of that, and still enjoy life if you are focused on what you're doing and you are able to run a business successfully. So those are my thoughts on that. I'll give it to Izzy for her thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, and I think the only thing I'd add, more of an ecosystem point than an issue with the individual. I think that we live in a society which doesn't show young people enough representation of everyday heroes, let's call them, like people who are just doing absolutely great at normal things, and we glorify tech entrepreneurs. We have an obsession with venture capital, which gives young people a kind of warped idea of what success is. And within the Black community in particular, we get this situation in which, because success has been denied to people or has made challenging to people in so many different industries, we are kind of overrepresented in terms of sports personalities and music personalities. And although those are fantastic, I think it's very telling that if you go into a primary school in the UK, in Tottenham, where I'm from, and you ask people what they want to be, they'll tell you they want to be a footballer, they'll tell you you want to be a rapper. It's not because those are the things they're good at. None of them can rap for anything. But the reality is that you want to be what you can see. And if you haven't had the opportunity to see many successful people who are just senior managers at KPMG, they're turning over 75K a year and they've got a car and a house in NW postcode. Like it's boring, but it's what you can do. And I think that we need to have more normal examples of successful people and stop glamorizing people in a few industries. And you can take that right back to kind of slavery, colonization, whatever historical perspective you want to read into that. But it's our gift now to show different representations of what success can look like.
Amazing. And I guess one for anyone thinking about starting a business, what advice would you have for them other than, signing up to a community and, getting the amazing support that you guys offer? What advice would you give someone who's thinking of, taking the plunge and starting that idea?
Yeah, so I'll go first on this. I think my advice to people is that, take all the conceptions you had about starting a business and put them in the bin. Come along to events that Foundervine hold, or find a community and just start engaging with them, and just come from the standpoint of I know nothing, right? Because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that these things are within your reach. It's just about you finding out the best ways of going about them. And it doesn't matter if you're working, unemployed, that, if you have passion and perseverance, I think those are the main key traits I see to start building a business successfully.
I think for me, I'm a bit of a broken record on this one because I will always say the same thing. Start with a community. So that's part one of what I would say. So start with the community, because especially in the beginning, when you are starting out and you're just by yourself, it is the loneliest, coldest place to be. You're up at 1 a.m. trying to do business model canvas, and no one's there to tell you whether you should have just stayed in your job. And the community you build around you will be one of the most important things to you. So build a community of peers as one element of it, and then build a community of mentors and advisors. I brought David and Cecil onto Foundervine as advisors, and they just loved it and stayed for 3 years. But that was the initial impetus was that I need help with this, guys, and you guys are smarter and older than me, so give me some of your time. And you'll be surprised at the number of people, if they truly believe in what you're doing, who will give you a ridiculous amount of their time, considering what they charge out at. And then when you have that community of peers, you have people around you who will save you money, because they'll tell you don't need to spend £5,000 on a website when all it needs to do is press one button. You can use Wix. So things like that I think are really useful. And the part two of what I would say is invest in being interesting to people. So a lot of people approach me and, I have an idea, Izzy, can I steal your time for half an hour to talk about my idea? There's no kind of finesse to it. There's no pitch. There's no reason why I should, carve out half an hour of a notorious schedule to give that time. Whereas when people approach me and they're genuinely interested in getting to know me, they're genuinely interested in building a mutually respectful and beneficial relationship, I have all of the time in the world, and I'll make that time. So be interesting and interested in people, and you will go so far. In the startup ecosystem, it's small, it's incestuous, everyone knows each other. So if you build a reputation for not being interested in people, I think it goes a long way. And then I'm cheating, but the third thing I'll say is get a coach. I've had three coaches in my career. 2 times it's led me to quit a job and do something else. So valuable in terms of helping you shape your thinking. And I'm a big fan of coaching. And if you have any questions about that, my emails are open, izzy@foundervine.com. So thank you.
I'll share your details at the end. All right, I don't want us to go too much over time, but I've got one more question and then one more fun question. Okay, so the first question is just to kind of help people get some tips on time management. So you both seem to do a lot of things within Foundervine and outside of Foundervine. So, what would be your top time management tips?
Yeah, so with time management, I think a lot of it is down to prioritization and understanding what tasks you have to do and which ones are most important. I use what is called the Pareto principle, which dictates that 20% of your efforts will get 80% of the results that you want. And I'm constantly looking for the 20% of tasks that I need to do. And I let the 80% drop in general, but you have to be comfortable with letting some things drop. And I also talk about just managing your emotions and managing your mind state, because it's not every point in the day that you're going to be as productive as you want. For me, in the morning, I'm super productive. At night, I am useless. I am so useless. I think I'm a waste man in the night, and I wouldn't invest in me. I wouldn't even want to be my friend in the evening. So I tend to do most of my stuff in the morning and then leave the evening for tasks that are don't require a lot of my mindset to be really on point. So those are the things that I would say. Focus on priorities and also manage your emotions and the time of the day that you are doing things.
Yeah, and for me, I would be a charlatan if I tried to teach anyone about time management, because I'm useless. But one thing that I found quite useful is having a virtual assistant who pretends to be me on emails and on LinkedIn. It can be awkward if she messages someone who I know and says, "Hey, it's great to meet you." But generally speaking, it's been really helpful. I also carve in time into my diary to do tasks. So you won't really be able to book a meeting with me before 12 p.m., especially because there's a time difference. I don't want to speak to you at 8 in the morning. And so being kind of strict in terms of saying no and being strict in terms of building in time to do things like expenses and meetings and I don't know, boring accountancy things. And that way I'm able to kind of structure my time more effectively. But I'm willing to be coached on how to manage my time even better. So yeah.
And then final question, more of a fun question. So it's Friday, you're in the office or at home. It's lunchtime. What's on your playlist, and what's for lunch?
Wow.
Oh.
Playlist. Wow. Okay. So I'm a massive fan of Usher and have been a massive fan since I was, I think 9 years old or so. That's always good.
9 years old.
Sorry?
I said, what
What's
were
that?
you to Usher at 9 years old?
I was listening to My Way, the
Oh,
old originals, man.
yes.
Yeah, but yeah, it was my cousin that introduced me to Usher. She's a girl, so she loved Usher, and I thought, yeah, like Usher's cool. She was older than me, so I was just like following everything she did. But Usher's always on my playlist. What's on my plate? Well, coming back to time management. So I believe you need to outsource as much as you can and do things in the shortest amount of time. Usually it's like a Sainsbury's pizza, and I don't want anyone to follow my example. I try and get some like jollof rice where I can, but it's become a commodity now in COVID crisis time. So it's usually something quick and short and not fun.
Izzy?
So in terms of my playlist, it depends like the energy that I'm looking for, but you might find me listening to, when I've got a lot of emails to go through, like Cardi or Megan, just to give me the energy that I need. But if I need to concentrate on writing like a long wordy document for something a bit more chill, like Khalid or I don't know, like just it's also like J. Cole, like something just like really kind of like slower and kind of makes me think a bit more. So that's kind of what you'll find me listening to. In terms of eating, you might find me like chomping on a mango, or I've just had sort of mango now, or just drinking from a fresh coconut, or I've trained my husband to make jollof and red and other Ghanaian dishes as well. So he just kind of slips me them whilst I'm on Zoom calls. So yeah, that's what you'll find me eating.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. It's been amazing. I've learned a lot, and taken some notes as well. So I guess for our next session, we'll post out details on our website. But in terms of reaching out to Cecil or Izzy, I've put their details in the chat. So if you want to copy that, please do so. But no, thank you everyone for taking your time out today to come and listen to us, and we hope to see you guys soon. Thank you, everyone.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you for the
everyone.
invite.